Hello mortals and welcome to the game Asylum. Have you ever bought a game that just sat on your physical digital shelf and just taunted you? It's not casting aspersions over your mother or anything, it's just sitting there. Perhaps this is just my particular strain of ADHD that prevents me from diving in. So to get this monkey off my back, let's talk about Devil's Hunt. We start this tale as our protagonist, Desmond Pierce, wakes up in a burning city filled with demons. And crawling through the ruined streets, we quickly find out that our lead is a bit tasty in the old fight department. If a tad clumsy. But wait, this toasty cold open was just a dream. And oh no, Desmond is late for work. But then if he is late, why is he worried? I mean, look at his pad. This kitchen is bigger than my fucking house. Plus he lives next to the ocean, with his own personal gym. And I'm not saying he's Richie Rich levels of rich, he ain't struggling. Anyway, this tangent is derailed with our lead speeding towards his grind, to be chewed out by his boss, who is of course, his father. Yep, Desmond is a trust fund Tommy. Very relatable. And for a bloke who is supposed to be our anchor to this world, which I will remind you is a world filled with over-the-top action and punching demons, this seems a bit off. And sure, there is no hard and fast rule when it comes to making your characters, but when I think of leads in action games, you can get away with them being surface level. For example, Dante from Devil May Cry is a flamboyant show-off, with a mouth that is as sharp as his blade. So would we, as a player, benefit from knowing that destroying his shop would lead to financial ruin? What about Bayonetta, who can kill you with the power of BDSM? Would us knowing that she sucks at saving money dampen that fact? Or hey, what about Raiden struggling to pay his rent due to his crippling hentai addiction? No, because you're too distracted by this.
Yes, waiting wide open!
Hell yes. So this overemphasis on Desmond's lifestyle and my facetious examples just screams of a writer overthinking their creation. And sure, I might be pulling blood from a seemingly irrelevant stone here, but it seems there's been a lot of effort made to make our avatar look cool. So the burning question is, who wrote this shit? This is where Devil's Hunt goes from a whatever game to something quite interesting. Now, you would think that this story is just another bum blast of gamery concepts thrown into a blender, written by a committee of chuds with peanut butter for brains, but no. This story is an adaptation of a series of books by former Polish footballer Paweł Lezenak, and I probably just butchered his name, so sorry to my Polish viewers, all three of you. Anyway, kicking the ball around a pitch for a disgusting amount of money wasn't his vibe, so at a ripe age of 26 he retired from sports ball to fully immerse himself in writing, and for the last decade, he has graced us with 11 books, and more specifically, a trilogy of these scribbles starring our leather-jacketed wanker. And before I say anything else, I am a sucker for book-to-game adaptations. The Witcher and the Metro series are some of my favourites, and sure, they are on the obvious side, because they are popular franchises, but reading about these cramped, crowded subway stations made my imagination run wild. So being able to walk around them is like crack to me. Sadly for our subject, we don't have that level of connection, as the novel the game is based on has never been translated, which I'll admit sucks. But then I do find it a bit sus when the marketing of this game is banging that adaptation drum to a book we cannot read. Perhaps there was going to be a simultaneous release of the books and the game, but I couldn't find anything about that. What I did find, however, is that Paweł is a budding Hideo Kojima, as Devil's Hunt was being made by his own studio. And additionally, he is the creative director. And while we wait for the arc where he parades a new celebrity twink on Twitter each week, we can console ourselves with his bio on the website, Polish Goodreads, that compares him to Dante Alighieri. Yes, the author of the Divine Comedy. Sorry, I'm filling the air because Devil's Hunt is the greatest game I have ever watched. To call its opening act front-loaded is an understatement, as the first and what feels like hours of this story is spent trying to prop up our lead as this downtrodden millionaire, which reflects on the environment of the writer more than the character, because trying to make someone who seems to have everything meaningful is a weird position to start from. Like, yeah, Max Payne lives in the suburbs of New Jersey in a modest home, but we are not focusing on that, we are invested in our lead discovering his murdered wife and child and the emotion of that moment. But here in Devil's Hunt, there's none of that. No, instead, we see our lead training to be an underground fighter. Yes, instead of a sport that could give him even more wealth, he wants to be a champion in something unrecognized and highly illegal, because he's not like the other Jake Pauls. Well, that was fucking pointless. And the more I watch, because we are still watching the opening goddamn part of this pissing game, the more of the vibe I got from our lead. He just reminds me of a bloke who shows you his bookshelf before his sports car, but then he'll keep that little fucker in frame, just to tell you that the pretentious drivel flopping out of his mouth is a smokescreen for his real hang-ups, like having a personality of a Ben Shapiro branded sex toy.
Knowledge.
And I could go on, but this shit screams of Desmond being a self-insert for the author. And fine, creating fiction where you're the all-powerful hero is fun, and putting a little of yourself and your surroundings into your fiction can add a lot. But there is a reason why most of these scribblings stay on hard drives or fan forums. And I don't want to say that word as a personal challenge, but edgy Mark Zuckerberg is not what I call a worthy protagonist. And sure, it's funny to lampoon this type of character, as the author loves him so very, very much, but yeah, I'm not feeling this particular strain of power fantasy. So when the downfall finally happens, and Desmond finds out his fiancée, who he has next to no chemistry with, has a fling with some guy he had a passing convo with at work, sends him into a downward spiral of childish machismo, which, you guessed it, ends up with him doing a naked jakey and driving off the bridge to his watery grave. Also, nice Painkiller reference, or rip-off, whatever side your bread is buttered. And sure, in books and in games you can flesh out your world in multiple ways, but this opening screed reeks of verbal diarrhea, and as a writer you need to know when to push your plot forward and when to slow it down, in order to keep your reader engaged. And yes, we may hate them, but pages upon pages of prose are going to happen. So it's important to use the medium telling this tale in creative ways to break up this dryness. Like for example, in Metro 2033, the lead character Artyom during gameplay is a silent protagonist. Yes, people talk to him, but he doesn't respond, which does sound a bit odd at first, but it does work for immersion, until you hit a loading screen.
Life was never easy in the tunnels, but it was our home. There was comfort in its routines, in seeing the same people day after day. But since the mutant attacks had escalated, fear ruled the station. I had just turned 20, and could never have imagined what would follow on the morning that my stepfather's friend Hunter arrived at the barricade.
And I'll admit, hearing him talk here was weird, but this forced downtime is a perfect opportunity for a quick campfire tale. It takes this mundane annoyance and turns it into a story beat. It's efficient as it takes place in brief snippets, but it's also effective for setting up the next chunk of the story. Anyway, Desmond wakes up in hell and meets with Lucifer, who brokers a deal with our lug to collect souls in order to bring him back to life, I guess. I would elaborate on this tired setup, but I'm too distracted by Lucy's voice actor, who sounds like a bloke at your local Starbucks complaining that his iced latte is too cold.
Do we know each other?
We do. Although, you might not know it. Yet. I've had countless names across the eons, but you will know me best as Lucifer. I created all that you've seen here, every beast, every tree. Here, I am the creator. But I want no throne. I do not seek separation. The Forsaken here are no different from me, hunted as I am. Unworthy of their lord's love as I am. Forbidden from heaven as I am. Like me, They are here for all eternity at the mere whim of God!
Ah, yeah, you can almost smell the Joker memes. After a cameo by friend of the show, David Cage, Discount Raziel rises from his grave to a song that sounds like Combi Christ if they were suffering the bends. And we make our way through this breezy cemetery to the first in a long run of punch-ups.
Hey, I need your car. You can keep your clothes and your boots.
So instead of talking about that and the stunning gameplay, pun intended, let's talk about the graphics. And to lay my cards on this table with such force that it crashes like this sodding game, I have a soft spot for the PS360 aesthetic, and DH is really poking this nostalgia. Sure, it doesn't have the softness of the barely HD resolution, the sawtooth edges of everything due to the lack of anti-aliasing, and of course the infamous piss filter that makes you feel like you're suffering from jaundice. Those suggestive pelvic thrusts attracted me to Devil's Hunt in the first place. Intentional or not, if you told me that this came out in 2009 instead of 2019, I may have believed you. While the look of this world is probably governed by the strict budget, the picture inside this frame is cool. And there was a ton of times where I just stood there and drank it all in, and let my mind wander to whatever brimstone shit that went on behind these backdrops. It gives you the sense of bigness without having an open world, which is good because I can't stand most contemporary open worlds. And sure, the level design is very PS Triple with its anal bead layout. There is something to be said about the density of these visuals, and unlike the story, it says a lot without saying a damn word. Alright, now that we've talked about the stuff I liked about Devil's Hunt, let's talk about the gameplay. To break it down, the punch-ups inside Dickhead are nothing new. You can lock onto the nearest jerk with the right stick, you can pummel them with light and heavy attacks, and if you're feeling extra frisky, you can finish them off with a pre-animated takedown and dodge around the shop like a stuttering dick. It's pretty standard stuff. So why does it suck? Well, it's threefold. Terrible controls, awful feedback, and a heavy reliance on a progression system that is equally superfluous as it is broken. And with the knowledge that Devil's Hunt was originally a PC game first, with the aspiration of jumping to consoles later, the emphasis on mouse and keyboard controls is pretty obvious, with the left click being the light and the right click being the heavy attacks. But for me especially, playing a game such as this feels weird on K&M. So how about a controller? It's functional, but I'm not a fan of how the game wants you to rapidly press the R1 and R2 buttons to perform these flurries. Okay, in Souls games, this is the standard setup, and for the most part it's comfortable, but here you are trying to spam these buttons for extended periods of time, which starts to cramp up my fingers like a fluffer of RSI. It's not great. So you think, okay, just go into the options menu and rebind the keys for the face buttons, but nope, all you get is two presets, but due to a bug, flipping between these two doesn't do anything. And hell, even trying to remap the buttons in the awesome Steam configurator didn't work, apart from making the buttons rapid fire, which you would think would take away from the skill of play, but no. The combo system is fundamentally flawed to begin with. Plus the default light attack stuns most enemies, so the incentive of flashy fighting is supplanted by cheap tactics, because the foes you face are just as cheap as you. Fantastic!
Objection!
Hey, hi, Scott here with a quick patch update. I managed to get the second controller layout working, and actually it's a lot better than the original one because you can actually use the attacks on square and triangle, which makes the gameplay far more comfortable. But now when I try and get back into the main menu, I can't use the shoulder buttons to flip the tabs, so yeah, this thing's just fucking cursed either way. Which would be forgiven if the feedback of your arsenal didn't sound like a wet fart in a Tupperware box. And from my experience playing these types of games throughout the years, you can get away with a ton of sins as long as the main loop sounds and feels impactful. Hell, in the early years of this pastime, this was most of the reason why beat 'em ups soaked up everyone's loose change. And while they may sound thin now when playing through emulation, when these slashes and bashes were being spat out from a mono speaker in a room thick with other crunchy effects, this soundscape had prominence. And then combine them with screen shakes and dramatic wails of whatever gimp you sent to an early grave, these basic button mashy attacks feel more than what they are. So for a fun comparison, this is what the combat in Devil's Hunt sounds like. The fucking combat sounds like shit. And now I have to apologize to the Callisto Protocol. Yes, your combat was one button bore, but at least it sounded like a fight, rather than a skirmish between a pair of rapidly deflating balloon animals, which is a perfect descriptor for the demon form, aka the devil trigger we have at home. And you may have noticed that I didn't compare Devil's Hunt to what you would think would be its contemporaries. While it's using the skin of a spectacle fighter, trying to compare them directly is a no contest. It might be creatively cribbing from Dante and co, but it doesn't have a clue how to integrate that dazzling display. Honestly, this is more in line with God Hand or Remember Me, which I'm cool with because I love those games, but its production wants to be the next Devil May Cry, but it's not hitting that mark. And I'm just being salty after watching endless reviews of this shit, where they compared this to the current zeitgeist. But wait, I hear no one cry, what about the RPG mechanics? Yes, like in every mediocre modern title, Devil's has a few extrinsic titties stapled to it, like the world's most depressing blow-up doll. And while they do spice up the ritual of punching shit to death, these, and I will be nice and call them skill trees, are full of the usual 1% here, 2% here bollocks that makes my eyes glaze over. There are a few meaningful abilities that are scattered about which are conceptually interesting, but just like me in a sack, they are limp in execution. Yeah, a thing that stuns enemies in a wide radius would be useful when you're being ganked from all sides, but just spamming the light attack with a sizable swipe, and aforementioned stun locking ability, negates the use of these specials entirely. And in the end, I just used the dash attack, which is the first spell you get to close the gap on boss fights, and the heal ability, when the iffy hit detection gods shat the bed and I lost half my health for no fucking reason. I would elaborate on these abilities further, but the game bugged out and I couldn't fully complete all 3 trees, so if there is a spell that makes Desmond jizz salted caramel magnums to counter the armies of diabolical diabetics, I will sadly never know. After a couple of these terrible scuffles, Desmond makes his way to his love rival's apartment. How did he find it? Did he look it up in the yellow pages for big cheating bastards? No cocking idea. But he does take the time to mock his mark for using a therapist.
So he's seeing a shrink. Expensive. I've got a quicker, cheaper cure for him.
Yeah, look at this pansy talking about his feelings. We big strong alphas are too manly for that shit. I should murder him for letting him think of these soft thoughts.
Oh, eat a dick, you adolescent prick. After that toxic twattery, our lead sits in the dark and broods, waiting for McLovin to come home so he can murder him in cold blood. And of course, this callous act needs our interactivity. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the hero of our story. Sadly, we can't dwell on this because Desmond is tasked to punch some more dudes and bollocks to this. I'm just gonna fast forward through this shit till we bump into his mentor who sounds like Lance Reddick doing an impression of Christopher Lee.
Desmond, this is the Saw. He is your immediate superior and commander-in-chief of all the Miami District Executors.
And oh yeah, we are also graced by this slab of Eastern European meat, who is the thug who choked out our lead earlier.
Are you sure that he really is the one? Savior and destroyer. He looks weak, not like an executor.
And I'm gonna cut this chest beating short because fucking hell. Who's next, Pavel? Is Desmond's primary school teacher gonna crash through the wall and give him a spanking for pissing on a toilet seat? Who else can we shove in that doesn't add anything to this fucking story? And this is why talking about the plot of Devil's Hunt beyond this point is difficult, because the writing is so inefficient. To the point I'm kinda stumped how messy everything is. And I know our author is trying to do a zesty spin on this anti-hero thing, and while I appreciate trying to circumvent the obvious tropes, there is a reason why a straight up plot works for this style of game. Trying to blast the player with erroneous information takes away from the agency of our protagonist, and while all this bloviating sounds fine during play, it's one of those stories that falls apart the instant you think about it. And as this plot progresses, it starts to unravel with such a speed, Sonic the Hedgehog would tell you to slow it down. And oh hey, do you remember the bloat we just murdered? You know, the one that was a catalyst for this entire story? Yeah, he is still alive. In fact, our walking Chekhov's gun turns out to be a demon as well. And I'm jumping ahead here, but the reveal of this twist is confusing.
Because of him, I committed suicide and ended up in hell.
You killed me. If you just listened to my explanation.
Don't you fucking touch me.
I don't have to.
Did you get that? Let me run it again.
I can't believe this story you're telling me. It's macabre.
Yeah, I have no fucking idea what that scene is trying to say. And no, I didn't edit that in any sort of way. That's how it shows you in game. So I'm just going to cut to a Garth Marenghi clip.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
But this is a microcosm of what I think the main problem with Devil's Hunt is. While I don't know for certain, this lack of focus feels like the game was unfinished. Yes, the skeleton is here, but it lacks the connecting tissue to make everything work. And I'm not over-egging the cake here. Every element has this slapdash feel, like the devs decided to put it all together, see how it all flowed, before they went in and polished, trimmed and jiggled all the elements. But this raises another rhetorical question. If this was the first pass, then why was it published? Were the creators behind this so precious about their project that they couldn't bear losing the myriad of exposition dumps and other bullshit? Or was it something as mundane as a game that overstretched its boundaries in both budget and skill, and it had to be released before the company went out of business? I'm not sure. Like I said, speculation. But it's something that kept nagging me while playing this. So anyway, trying to push this fucking plot forward before I lose my noggin trying to detangle this dog shit, our boy fights to the top of a tower to reap another soul and oh fuck it, who cares? Then we smash cut to a mysterious steamy sewer to be given an update on Dell's missus.
No, he can't be dead. He was just... Oh, I don't know. God, I can't remember. Why can't I remember that night?
Which, as you can see, is an Oscar-worthy performance. And because it's been a few minutes, we get introduced to another character, Muriel, who is built up to be a big deal, but like the rest of this fucking story, doesn't matter. And Pavel, can you stop derailing this narrative to wave more OCs at us? I'm trying to do a play-by-play here. Luckily, this is interrupted by another character, Vera, aka my goth waifu. So let's see what our dark-cladded temptress has to say.
What's this savior and destroyer stuff that everyone keeps talking about?
All I know is that you're somehow important. Everybody's taken an interest in you. The demons, the generals, hell, even Lucifer personally. Don't know why. Look, I am just a young demoness.
Hello, fellow human. I am also a fellow human.
This is another story motive that is driven into the ground. That Desmond is the, and I quote, the savior and destroyer of this world. And I know this is a translated text, so it could be a little bit of word fuckery going on here. But to my ears, it just sounds clunky. And it would be awfully pedantic that some dickhead would make a montage of this out of just sheer spite.
Savior and destroyer.
Savior or the destroyer.
Savior and destroyer.
Savior or destroyer.
Will you choose the way of a savior?
And shield the earth from the invasion of Hell's forces, or
will you become a destroyer?
The savior and destroyer. Savior and destroyer.
Hello, I'm a Mac.
And I'm a PC.
Savior and destroyer. Be the savior and destroyer.
With a would-be savior and destroyer. Ha! Savior and destroyer.
Savior and destroyer.
Sawyer will not allow you to fight the Savior and Destroyer.
Now, I normally hate doing these shill bits, but yeah, here is the people on screen that are supporting me through Patreon, which I know it's only a handful of people right now, but still blows me away that people want to support me in that way, and I'm deeply humbled by that. And if you want to be part of this, links below. Also, I have YouTube members too, so you can throw your money into that tire fire. Also, I want to give a shout out to my girlfriend, who has been making some really killer tracks recently. In fact, one of them, Dante, is on this video. So if you want to check out more, there is a link in the description for that too. And yeah, let's get back to this fucking mess. Actually, no, to hammer home this dull, wordy void, I'm going to rewind it and make you watch this whole scene.
Who's Muriel?
No more questions.
What? No, wait, you said you'd answer 3.
Oh, never trust a demon, sweetie. Especially a beautiful female one.
I said I wasn't going to use the word, but... Dan Olsen, please help me.
Cringe. There's no other word for it. This makes me cringe. It's embarrassing.
Assignment. The usual place. Tell him that time has run out and reap his soul.
So yeah, all that wordy slurry just to say, go here and kill a dude. And I have a question, was Pathel being paid by the word? Because this could have been a fucking email. Back on the trail, and Desmond is tasked to blah 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 blah. Oh wait, hold the phone. Is this a relevant plot point?
I said, stop it.
Who the fuck are you and why did you get in the way?
I am an angel, and, well, I am an angel.
Oh, I love poetry. As you can see, this is where we're introduced to a clan of godly twinks with their holy and low attitude and, of course, godlike voice acting. Yep, it's another tangent, because we gotta get that heaven versus hell feud going. So skipping all this bullshit, the gays easily slice up our chud, and he ends up in hell, again. And after punching some more chaff, we meet with this dapper lad. And yes, Chad Brian Blessed is another side quest, this time to bust out an inmate from Hell Alcatraz, that is apparently impossible to crack. Now, I'm not sure if that's due to the top of the line security, or because I'm so out of my mind bored, I can only play this game at this point in half-an-hour bursts, because I'm so checked fucking out. And if you're looking for the definition of filler content, you are currently looking at it. Which is a shame, because Belly, or whatever the fuck his name is, I imagine it's a play on Beelzebub, would be an interesting character to explore further. But no, once you got the MacGuffin, it's on to another series of half-baked events. This time involving Desmond's missus, who he has been essentially stalking throughout this caper. Also, I did notice that she's not living in Desmond's house, but in her own plush mansion, which, no wait, why the fuck is Dell using his pad as a hidey hole? I mean, he must have been dead for a while and no one has sold it off. Also, the dynamic of this relationship post the demon reveal of what's-his-face, you know, that confusing scene, you'd think Desmond's partner would be a little bit freaked out. But when he finally reveals himself to her in his new devilish ways, she's fine with it. There's not even a dude what the fuck. You left me heavy petting your demonic mate while gallivanting around Miami trying to prove your manliness. Maybe I needed someone affectionate who cared for me, rather than some preening tosspot that's so deep in the closet his postcode is in fucking Narnia. You see what this game has done to me? I'm so unengaged I'm talking about this greasy shit to cope. Devil's Hunt isn't just dull, it is pathologically dull. And while I could get into particulars, like the resolution of this whole fucking smegma rash ends on a to be continued, rendering whatever bloviated bollocks we had to endure completely irrelevant. Getting revenge? Pointless. Reaping souls to fulfill a vague quota? Complete waste of time. And one of the worst boss fights, where I have to beat the fist of the Eastern European star for fucking macho points. Whatever, it's anticlimactic. So yeah, I'm done trying to recall this tedium, which is a new one for me because usually I like to give you a full picking apart. But there's only so many ways I can say Desmond did a thing before I want to slam my knob in the door just to do something else. Usually I'm down with some jank. But this is beyond the pale of clutched together crap. And while I feel for Layopi Games, as it's evident they are out of their depth, it doesn't take away how ass backwards Devil's Hunt truly is. And while I could kick shins like Desmond has the charisma of a pocket pussy filled with cement, or the tone is like a Five Finger Death Punch song covered by Alvin and the Chipmunks, or the story reads like an incel manifesto with half the words being racial slurs, but they don't scratch the incomprehensible mountain of stuff that Pavel tried to inject into this game instead of focusing on the subject at hand, i.e. being a fucking badass and beating the shit out of everything, while giving little winks to a wider narrative. Instead of that, they try to crunch the lore into something that should have been a cheeky panty flash, but instead the story reads like a TED Talk on pack mentality hosted by Elon Musk. And if you haven't grasped my contempt for Devil's Hunt, what I hate about this story the most is that it's so juvenile, and the underlying manosphere coded shit we threw out, like a Lynx branded piss stream, is the cactus in my meters that refuses to shift. And fine. The novel was published 10 years before this game came out, when the author was in his mid-20s. So yeah, you can see where he was in a headspace when he wrote the story. But the text to me feels like shit he would have felt 10 years before that, in a 4chan post filled with macho posturing and Joe Rogan memes. And this ain't my fucking vibe whatsoever. But it probably explains why Pavel kept to his own lane, instead of publishing books outside of Poland. Because if he launched his pulpy abortion in English, I think we would have clowned on it and called it the next Empress Teresa. And I think that's the worst thing about it. There's no catharsis, there's no fun with this story. It's all po-faced and self-serious, and it just doesn't work. Which in better examples would be great, because yeah, okay, this self-serious nature is swinging round to being campy and silly. But no, it wants to be taken seriously, and I just can't take this seriously at all. They want Desmond to be the straightest arrow in an entire quiver, but then ironically it just makes him look like a complete fucking idiot. And this game to be a distant bag of masculine shite that tries to be DMC, but doesn't know it's Dante from its arsehole. Which is again ironic, because if you buy into this chudtastic idiocy, apparently touching a bunghole is gay. And man, I just want to go home. Yeah, that's right, it's time for a beat switch. This is, well, I just said it, a visual novel. Something I don't really play that often, but as you can tell by its MS Paint style vibes, it just called out to me. You play as some random dolt with no name, seeking refuge from the rain inside a cafe. And I don't really want to spoil this too much because the game itself only takes about 20 minutes to beat, but I just love the coziness of everything. If I was going to put this story in a nutsack, it's a little bit of everything. Bit of intrigue, murder mystery, drinking vodka until you pass out, you know, the usual shit. But that presentation is sublime. The constant rain, the garish colours and the uncanniness of the people you meet. It all has this graffiti art style that is really appealing. And I love its urban feel. It gives you that wild spirit of a city where you can meet the most warmest and nicest people in the worst of places, and vice versa. And the reason why I'm talking about it here is that I played this just after beating Devil's Hunt, after being so mind-numbingly bored with that game. To then see this on Steam for barely £3 and just firing it up on a whim, and it just captivated me. And I think what really grabbed me was just the simplicity of it all. The story is not intricate, but it's not shallow. It has a bit of layers to it, but it's not bogging you down with plot lines that don't go anywhere, with relatable characters that just ooze cool without the need of ridiculous bullshit to make them cooler than they actually are. It's very understated in that way. All in all, if you're watching this video, this will be the game you should be playing. And I know I just said it, but it has vibes for days, and I fuck with it wholeheartedly. So yeah, if you find a game on your shelf that you're intrigued by, go ahead and play it, as long as it's not Devil's Hunt, or any other straight white bread, white man fucking cringe. And that's all I have to say for now.